killed by an F5 tornado. I will tell you that the people that work in the newsroom, those of you that are in the control room or whatnot, people that are assignment people, producers or whatnot, just remember they are desperate to get shots and they will sacrifice your life in order to get them. So if you're a reporter out in the field, watch your own buns, be aware. On the day that this tornado hit, I was fairly new to Oklahoma. And this thing is ravaging a part of the community. And there was another reporter. This is when we had, they were talking through like walkie-talkies, right? They had, I don't even know what you'd call them, CB radios, something like that, to each other on the thing. And I remember one of the other reporters there was on the, and I was fairly new, and we were being told where to go and whatnot. And this other reporter said, "Jim, you do not have to go there. You do not have to do what they're telling you to do. You do not, blah, 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 blah." She knew the danger. And then the other line was, "Now head down highway such and such." So we went under, we actually were heading down. We saw people gathering under a bridge. And we're like, we don't know what's going on. My photographer was fairly new too. So we pulled over. We got out and we're looking to see what's going on. We see this big, huge thing that, and I'm thinking a tornado looks like Wizard of Oz, you know, it's a cone, and this didn't look anything like that. And you can hear my voice saying, "Well, I don't think that's a tornado. It just looks like a bunch of rain, you know." So we take off down the road, and other people follow us because they see we have a marked truck, and they're thinking, "Well, they must know what they're doing." So we're heading down the road, and then debris starts to hit the windshield, and then it became apparent this was a huge tornado. And there was a moment at which I got numb and thought, we're going to die here. This is it. Great. In Oklahoma. So we didn't get killed, of course. Here I am. And we were able to pull off the road as it passed us. Turned out, by pure dumb luck, the people that were taking refuge under the freeway took a direct hit.
Oh, wow.
And so that was not a good scene. That was not good. There was one woman that lost her life there.
Wow.
Just terrible.
And
terrible.
that's where y'all had just left from?
That's where we had just left. Pure dumb luck. Because if we had identified it as a tornado, we would have taken refuge. We would have, which would have been the wrong thing to do. And they do tell you, it was just inexperience and pure dumb luck that we went. But I mean, the bottom line for you guys is as you get into your career, there'll be things that come up where you have to judge, is this safe for me to pursue this? Whether it is, hey, can you go knock on this door because that's where that gun suspect we think is. Yeah, maybe that's not a good idea, but why don't you guys do it and then I'll report on it. So little things like that, just keep that in mind. things can come up. I will share with you, it's kind of anecdotal here, in that scene where this woman was sucked out of the bridge, I did a number of stories with her son who survived. He was only 11 years old at the time. This is the story that he relayed to me about how this went down. When they got there, he and his mother ran up to take refuge and hold on to a pipe that everybody else was holding on to at the wedge. When they got up there, there was no room. So only the son was able to get his arms around, he squeezed in, got his arms around the pipe. His mother held on to him. When the tornado hit, it was so forceful, she sensed that she was pulling him out. So she said it to him, "I love you," and let go. And that's why she got sucked out, to save his life. She wasn't going to take him with her. And he was able to hang on. So what values are in knowing that story? You will, and this is part of the joy and anguish of this career, you will have contact firsthand with people that have gone through things like that. You'll have firsthand contact and conversations and learning from people who are inventing new things. The most recent one I remember is a new spine joint being made here in San Diego, where you're just like, wow, this is right on the cutting edge of what's being done right now. The construction of spacecraft as we're, hoping to go to Mars, and the access to things like that, to see that stuff firsthand. It is a career like none other in terms of what's going to happen today. You don't know. The other thing is, a lot of jobs, you look at the clock and you're like, when are we getting out of here? It's like the seconds are just going so slow. In this career, it's just the opposite. When you're doing reporting, you're looking at the clock to see, oh my God, are we going to make it? Are we going to be making this on time? Because we're running out of time to get this together. The other thing is, because of technology and because of this move across all industries, it seems, to have more done with less people, when I came up, I always had a photographer, and the photographer was shot the video and then edited the video. Your focus was telling the story. Now they have, and you guys have probably heard of it, which is the multimedia journalist, thank you, MMJ. And everybody's an MMJ now. They get slapped with that title. And your job now is to shoot it, to edit it, to do the whole thing. And so I applaud the people coming in that can do it. I never mastered that. It's like your brain's going in so many different directions. And I have seen people do it with great talent, especially some young people coming up that have gotten in there and just nail it. And their mindset is, this is the way it is. This is how we do things. For me, it was, are you kidding me? So I was lucky in that throughout my career, they're like, just send a photographer with that guy because we're not going to try to have him mix slot with just by himself. So I know I get off track because I'm just going kind of freedom of thought here. But it is a worthwhile and fun, rewarding career if you decide to go in this direction. It's awesome. There's also lots of work out there. You will be able to find your niche, definitely. You just have to keep at it. You have to just be positive about what it is that you're doing. They are constantly looking for new people to get into the industry. You may get fed up with it part way into it and go, to hell with this. I have a number of friends who have done that once they got into it. Said, in fact, again, as I'm sparked, my memory gets sparked here. When I started, I had a job for the city of West Covina. This is without getting into too much minutia. But it was the kind of job where, actually, I worked at a college. Mount San Antonio College. Anybody heard of Mount San Antonio College? That's where they were based. And that is, God, I can't even remember. What town is Mount San Antonio College in? It's east of LA. That's good enough. So, anyway, I was settled doing that. And then when I went out to Palm Springs to do the job, I had a great situation. They said, you can do it for a month. And my old employer said, do it for a month. And if you don't like it, you can come back. So I did it for a month. And I said, this is nuts. This whole industry is crazy. And I'm going back to my job that was much easier to handle. And as I was leaving, basically the general manager at that station stroked my ego and said, Jim, I'm not going to let you go, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, I'll stay. At the time, I had a good friend. I don't know if you ever heard of Troy Roberts. He used to be on, what was it? One of those, like 24 hours, 48 hours he was on. He was one of the hosts that did those crime stories. And he told me to, he encouraged me. He said, no, you gotta stick with it, So there was a change there in what to do in life, which is what we're all subject to, right? You think you're gonna do one thing, something else comes up, whatever it is, life situation, and you end up doing something else. And before you know it, then you're like me and you're talking to a community college class after you've been in the business now for 30 years going, how the hell did that happen, It's just a flash. But all in all, I can only tell you that it overall is extremely rewarding. And it's great to have a job where you're not looking at the clock except for to see whether or not you got time to get the work done. Because that means you're engaged and you're involved, you know? You will have plenty, of course, to complain about, but that's true of any job. And you'll be working with people that you've already been meeting, I'm sure, who are adept and talented, and you just love to be around this with them. Because this is like where it's happening, right? To be in a studio, it's a nerve center. It's awesome. It's a great, great vibe and feeling, and you're already there. Oh, like I said though, your first step will probably be much smaller than this. This is really cool. So, is there anything on your minds?
I'd love for you to.
Are you a student?
I have an agenda for you.
Yes.
Could you talk about some tips for them, some performance tips, even how you using the teleprompter, this module this week we've been working on the teleprompter, and then also kind of what your day looked like and some of the terminology and how things change, some of that would be cool to hear too.
Okay. In terms of those of you that are going to work on camera, again, all I can say is forgive yourselves if you cringe when you look at what you're doing and you think, oh my God, you know, because I think that's very normal. Even people that are accomplished will say they can't even stand. I saw a thing recently with one of the national programs, and the anchors were talking to each other about, can you watch your own stuff? And even after all of their accomplishments and working at the national level, they said, no, I can't. Some of them say, I cannot look at my own work. And I can relate to that. You will get better as you go. I like to think of it as kind of a circle, that you'll start off trying to imitate a reporter and sounding like you're trying to imitate what you think a reporter is. And then as you get more and more experience, you gradually start to go full circle and come back to being you and just being yourself, which sounds the most authentic. So, but it takes a little time to do that because we're all judging ourselves, and I'm not good enough, and I need to do this or that to be accepted. I can tell you, having been in some leadership positions in a newsroom, the most important thing when someone would come in and they're new is, do they have a positive attitude? Because if they have that and they're willing to learn, you just want to be around them. And I've seen one after the other of those folks get a niche and then, you know, go on, fly, and succeed. What was the other question?
On camera tips, and then the other, so on camera tips.
I really didn't give you any on camera tips. Well, I guess a little bit, because I was making sure that you know not to overjudge yourself, right? The other thing is, if you're reading a teleprompter, and those of you that have, I mean, it's so awesome, the stuff that you have here. You know, one of the keys is to know your scripts as best you can beforehand, so you're not running into something that's new. That'll happen with breaking news. Things will be put in front of you. You know, when breaking news happens, you'll have, and you may have it here already, people talking in your ear, right? All kinds of stuff going on, and you're trying to filter out and filter in whatever you need in order to sound coherent on the air. I can tell you that when you make a mistake on air, don't bring attention to it. You don't have to apologize. If you stumble, you don't have to say, oh, excuse me. If you stumble 2 or 3 times in a row, maybe then. But for the most part, if you don't bring attention to it, no one will notice. When you watch the news now, listen for the goofs, listen for the stumbles. They won't bring attention to it, not the ones with experience. They just keep on going, because that's how we talk anyway, right? So that's a big tip that I had to learn. I can remember the first resume that I sent out. One of the qualities I put in there was, I'm comfortable with the IFB. And I thought, oh, they'll want to know this. Well, then I realized as I got into business, all I did was announce, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, because that's just understood. You don't have to mention that you can wear an IFB. You know, if you're doing that, then, but the forgiving part of it is the industry knows that people are new. The industry knows that you have new folks coming in and they're going to be learning. The payback is those first stations you work at, if that's the route you go, right, are going to pay you not enough. But that's part of, it's almost like that's your tuition, right, in the professional world. You won't make that much at the first station, you'll make a bit more at the second station, and then it keeps going up until you're, you know, being well compensated. If you can manage to get yourself on an anchor desk in broadcast news, that's where the money is. That's how they, you know, dole it out. So a lot of folks will end up going into management because there's also money to be had if you're the news director or the assistant news director, some positions like that. What was the other?
And then the other thing is just talking about your day, like what you did and maybe even your process and how you gathered your stories. Just kind of give us a glimpse of
Gotcha.
What goes on in Jim's brain.
Gotcha. Your day, and again, this is fun, and there's two different ways to look at it. If, as a reporter, your day is pretty much harried from beginning to end, because you'll get an assignment or whatever it is, and it can go a couple of different ways. You may get an assignment and they're going, oh, head up to Carlsbad, we want you to cover such and such. And so you're driving all the way up there to Carlsbad, and then, you know, the phone rings and they're like, yeah, scratch that. We need you to head down to the border because this and that happened. And you're like, you guys do realize there are other cars, don't you, that are on the road? So you'll have hectic days like that where it's just like, this is insane. What are we doing, you know? And San Diego's huge, so it's a market where you can drive all over the place. I have a good friend that's still a reporter in Salt Lake City. I was just talking to him today, and he was telling me about, because Salt Lake City is huge and laid out like that, and he's driving all over the place. It's like, you know, anyway, it's chat between reporters. It gets comical, but he was just complaining about that same thing. So, depending on the day, how do you approach a story? It also depends on the story, and that's part of the fun of it, right? If you know what the story's about, sometimes you can get a little lead by trying to sketch out, this is how I think it's going to go. And then, you know, these are, you know, especially if I'm able to read something about this particular story, whether it's a press release, sometimes it's a newspaper article, whatever has tipped it off, you may be able to get a little head start by trying to pencil out, this is where we're going to go with this story. And then you know when you're interviewing the folks what you need to ask them. One of the, I don't know to call it a failing, but one of the lessons that was hard for me to get was that when I would talk to and interview people on the scene of the story, I loved to ask one question after another. Well, that's great if we were doing a documentary, but we were doing a turn it around now, get it on the air story. And so what I needed to learn was, look, ask 2 or 3 questions. If you hear usable stuff, stop. Because you don't have time to talk to this person for 20 minutes. Because on the other side of that, now you've got to log that. Now you got to go through that and see what it is you want to use from that. The more choices you leave for yourself, yeah, it'll create a better story if you have the time. But if you don't have the time, it's going to create a lot more anxiety and pressure because you're trying to filter what all that stuff is. So if you can be more disciplined about it when you do that kind of work, you'll save yourself a lot of grief. I was notorious for nearly and sometimes over the line not making slop because of just over interviewing everybody and trying to build this, you know, fantastic story that we didn't have time to build. And the people that are working, that are, you know, the producers and the people behind the scenes, they need to fill slot and fill out the show. Their mind is thinking, I need to fill 90 seconds here. That's the bottom line. I got to fill 90 seconds. I don't care what this thing is. Just get me 90 seconds on the air. as opposed to the reporter who may be thinking, wow, this has got to be great. Which soundbite? What way she said it here, the way she said it here, what to do, So, opposing things there. So I hope that's useful for you as you move forward.
Just kind of what you're talking about, what
Okay.
the day looked like, and
Gotcha.
kind of maybe how.
I can tell you, I can also speak from the anchor side because a lot of my career was spent on an anchor desk. And the thing, if you get an anchor job, is you want to know your scripts, read about them. If you don't understand something, the key to a smooth delivery, as again we get back to the prompter, is really not to just read it, but to understand it, to know what you're talking about, to know that it doesn't have to come out word for word as it's written on a teleprompter if you completely understand it. Because now you can be more conversational. You know it's supposed to be said. It doesn't have to be word for word. If you get lost on words, you can sound like you're saying words as opposed to ideas. And what you want to do is give ideas to people because ideas are conversational. They flow. Words, if you're just stuck on the words, then it's like whatever, like reading that list or whatever. I'm trying to hit, please only stack chairs 5 high. That's stuck on words as opposed to, hey, please only stack the chairs 5 high. So know the scripts to the point of knowing the ideas. One of the things that happened more and more as my career progressed, and again with this kind of we want more for less, is that the anchors were no longer just anchors. They want the anchors to also be reporters, which is fine. But in the later part of my career, it became so burdensome that the priority, because they put deadlines on the stories, now you were focused on getting your story done, the reporter story done, even though you had to anchor a show in 30 minutes, you're trying to jam away on this story that they want done, and then reading your scripts became an afterthought. You would be rushed on set to go do the show, and literally during breaks, you're looking at your scripts and seeing, okay, what comes up next? What do we have here? While your co-anchor is reading, you're reading the script that you have coming up next, which I would argue is not a good way to approach it, but there's a lot of pressure, I guess, on the station with the changing, demographics of how TV is watched, with broadcast having to compete with online things, which also reminds me, used to be when you reported that you did your story, you met your deadline, and after the story was done, the producer came in your ear and said, oh, nice work, whatever, great you guys, and you could all go, Now, they want your online story, right? So it's like, yeah, you guys are done, great. Now, sweat it out in the truck, trying to write your online version, which can't be written the same way as your television version. It's got to be in print form. So now you're a newspaper reporter, and you're putting that in print form. So the sound bites that were said by the people on your thing, now you're putting that in print form, and you're transcribing their sound bites and making sure it reads with the quotes and everything else, and get that. And then occasionally you'll have somebody back at the station go, hey, can you do a little bit like a sideline of 5 points that weren't in your story so that we can tell people there's extra stuff on the online stuff? And he's just like, no, I can't. Enough already. We're done. We're slammed. But some people handle that better than others. I think it may be partly generational because I came from a generation where once your story was done, you got the good job, buddy. You're done. And then it changed midway through what I was doing. Reminds me of when I was coming up, they had anchors who were strictly anchors. It was just their voice, right? Their presence on the anchor desk. And so that's all they did. They just read. I thought you were but as I was coming up, it became more, no, you have to be able to report as well. Internet hadn't come along yet, but the reporting part of it did. So I saw that transition in how that helped me rise, having that skill at reporting, and how the older generation was getting phased out because all they could do was read, write. As skillfully as it was, as gifted as they were, still, that wasn't enough. So you had to be a reporter too. And then now, at the tail end of my career in broadcast, I see that transition happening again, only now another layer has been added, which is the internet. And having online stories added to it all. So you're not done just because you finish your story. Now you've got to get it online. And now also in the middle of everything, they want you posting on Instagram and whatever else it is. And you'll see some of, and I bless those that are adept at it. You guys know Netta from Netta Rampur? Doesn't ring a bell? She's on a morning show, so sometimes it's harder with a morning show to recognize people. But anyway, she was very adept at it. During the breaks, during commercial breaks, I used to work with her, side by side. She would be furiously, posting something online, this, that. And I was just like, how are you doing this? But that was her mindset, to think in those terms. So just understand, for those of you that maybe go the broadcast route, that's all out there now. You'll be an MMJ, most likely. That means you'll be shooting it, editing, getting it all together, and then doing the online stuff as well. And so you have to think, can I handle that? Maybe you'll find out on the job, but it gets a little nuts. It does get a little nuts.
I had a question. As an anchor, do you, how much input do you have editorial for broadcast?
Oh, you have a lot. The structure in the newsroom, writers in the newsroom tend to be the youngest people in the newsroom and the most inexperienced, right? They're new at it. And you would think, well, that seems odd. Isn't the writing like one of the most important things happening? And I would say, yes, it is. But nonetheless, the writers are considered the entry-level people. And so you have sway on how it goes in large part because these people are learning. And so you help to bring them along, Are you sure about this or that, related to what the story is? As far as the structure of the show, the producers, it depends on the producer you have. They will reach out as much as they think that they need to, what do you think about this story or that? Usually the story of the day announces itself. It's some news days are slow, but when you get into a larger market, especially like San Diego, the top stories tend to say, here we are, we're your top stories, and then the other stuff, they'll fill in as they need. So, but yeah, we do have say.
How much of your arrival to the position that you got to had to do with talent, and how much did it have to do with just practice and overcoming those insecurities, whether it be on camera and all those things?
Well, don't make me say I'm talented. I think you do have to gain a fluid. When I was getting hired at the larger stations, they told me one of the reasons we hired you is that you're fluid. You don't sound like you're reading. And so I know that helped. And I like to think that I had a positive attitude. And now, I'm a complete human being. I've blown up before too, because things get frustrating. When I was in Oklahoma City, we had been out all day. I think was it around the tornado stories? Anyway, we had been out all day on these stories, just exhausted. It's now, we get back to the station not until 1 a.m. And the news director sees me and goes, we need to get you down to such and such. They just got hit by another tornado. Well, such and such was an hour and a half drive away. We've already been working all day. It's now 1 o'clock in the morning. You want us to drive for an hour and a half? Oh, it's Dillard. Go down to Dillard. I know that means nothing to anybody. I don't even know where Dillard is anymore. But that was the command. And I remember I was not happy. Like, this is insane. Are you kidding me? But there we were, out, out to do it. We actually got lucky. We're in total darkness. You're in the middle of the boonies, and it just so happened that a fire truck passed us, and we're like, follow that guy. And
Keep up.
he was going to a bunch of damage, so it worked out. We were able to get the story. And then, if you get pushed enough and you're tired enough, you probably all have this experience where you almost get energy again because you become delirious. And you're just like, whatever, we'll get through this. So okay, so we talked a little bit about performance, and to me, the key with sounding conversational is knowing the scripts well enough that you know the ideas, you're familiar with what it is that you're saying, and if you had to, you could say it to somebody in different words. You understand the story. Don't get caught on perfection for word for word for word, because it'll sound like you're reading word for word for word. When you have the opportunity, record your stuff. Look at it. Be objective. What do you see when you look at it? Now, I say that remembering that when I looked at my early stuff, and even now, if I look back at some of my early stuff, I just cringe. I mean, it was really not good. But gradually, it starts to get better. So, and the main thing is just be positive. Have a good attitude. You do that, I guarantee you, people will gravitate to you. Just like with anything. If you're positive, and then you'll figure out your niche, where it's going. Anyway.
I do have to say, you're making this sound so appealing.
Did I make it sound bad? Well,
Just though, going till 1 o'clock in the morning, and I know it's super anecdotal,
right, and that's the exception.
yeah.
That's the exception. That wasn't every day. Yeah. My last 5 years were spent on a morning show where we would get up. I would get up at 2:22. I set my alarm for 2:22 because I thought it was cool. 2:22.
That's a great number.
See? Yeah, thank you very much. So, and then we would be on the air by, at the time, the first show was at 4:30, then 4:30 to 7, and then you'd have a break, and then you're on from 11 to noon. That worked on your brain. That was really tough. It was against your circadian rhythm. It just built and built, just the exhaustion that built from that. And then it really built when the station started with this story assignment stuff, because noon is when you're supposed to be off, and at noon they would go, oh, go shoot such and such. Are you out of your minds? I've been here. Do you not realize I've been here since 3 a.m.? And the thing was, no, they don't always realize, because they haven't. They've slept to 7 a.m. and they came in at a normal hour, and then are lacking the empathy that they should have for people that have been here throughout the night. So there was some frustration there, but I want you to have the positive thoughts in your head that this is a creative thing you're doing, and there's nothing else that I know of like it. Some of you are want to go into acting or other kinds of scripts, other kinds of production, but it's all creative, right? It's all fantastic. Your teacher here does all kinds of stuff, right? Voiceovers and different things. I mean, it's fun. It's a drive. In retirement, I'm officiating weddings now. It's totally relaxed. It's relaxed, it's fun, it gives you a chance to do a little performance. So somehow you'll find, your niche. Basically, you are creative people, and this is a creative outlet. And so you're going to figure out how to keep your creative spark alive and to find your niche. And your niche may only last for a few years before you decide it needs to be a bigger niche somewhere else, or a different thing angled here, there, wherever it is. The beauty is it's in front of you. I envy you in that way. It's like this is something that you're discovering, and I get romanticized, about the experience that I went through, and looking back on the things that I learned along the way, and how fortunate I was to make a living in broadcast television. And I didn't always do news. I started out with that magazine show for LA County. We went all kinds of places, showing people county parks and whatnot. It was very magazine format. So yeah, it was cool. It was a good time. So I want you to feel positive. It's fun to tell the negative parts, right? And also to be prepared. But frankly, name a job where you can't name that. There isn't a job. We were at Walmart, my girlfriend and I were at Walmart the other day, and I'm looking around at the people who work there, and I'm like, these people should be paid $1 million a day. Because I couldn't work here for an hour. So.
Real quick, Jim, when you were traveling, I guess we're moving around different places. Obviously, you're regional, and that was pretty convenient. You're taking off and going to Oklahoma.
Right.
That, well, I'm sure you met other people doing the same thing from all over the country doing that. What kind of challenges did that present? Like just picking up, I don't know if you had a family or what you were doing at that point. How do you navigate?
Well, yeah, it's funny that it's a great question because I was so naive about what Oklahoma meant. I had a Mitsubishi truck at the time. I don't think Mitsubishi exists.
Maples in.
Yeah. Anyway, I had my Mitsubishi truck, and I'm like, I'm going to have to sell my truck. They're not going to want a Japanese car in Oklahoma, That's how naive I was about what the Midwest was all about. And then I got there, and I'm like, oh, it's just like everywhere else in America. They were certainly just as sophisticated. They were a lot friendlier than what I was used to in Southern California. I remember getting, when I first got out there, I went in a place called a Get and Go, which is, if you're familiar, it's like 7-Eleven. And I walk in there, and the guy goes, how you doing? And I looked around, and I'm like, how am I doing? Like, who wants to know, how I'm doing? And then I realized this is just Oklahoma. Everywhere you go, it's like, how you doing? I'm doing good, I mean, it was just such a friendlier, the pace was also slower, so it was really nice. And I was there not too long after, when did I get there? Late 90s. Oklahoma City bombing, I think, was in 95. And so a number of the stories I did were related to that. And they had, at one point, they flew me out to talk to the Attorney General, Janet Reno, who, of course, has passed since then, but interviewed her at her home about, that whole case, because it was the 5-year anniversary of the bombing. Also, the execution of Tim McVeigh was flown to Terre Haute to cover that. I was not a witness to the execution, but we were reporting with everybody else outside the prison there. So you never know. I mean, I also, when Columbine happened, and that was before school shootings became, in vogue, they sent me to Columbine, and I got there the day after Columbine had happened. And that was, talk about a broadcast story. They sent us to Columbine without an edit truck, without a way to get our stuff back. Are you kidding me? Really? So I was going around to the other stations, knocking on their production vans or, trucks, telling them our situation and pleading for them to let us use their equipment to get our stuff done. And one of them actually said, okay, you can.
Were you like, how you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Jim Patton, Oklahoma City. Yeah, good to meet you. I noticed you got a nice truck here.
Hey Jim, I think some people don't realize there wasn't a cell phone back then either.
Right. Yeah, it was a different.
It was just you.
It was a different world. It was a different, much more basic. In some ways, it was better because they couldn't. Sometimes being unreachable is a good thing. But you just never know. And your experiences, it'll all be new. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, what these new big stories are going to be. Anecdotally, another story that I remember is after the tornadoes, President Clinton, this is how far back we're going, right? He was touring the damage of the area, and they had told us beforehand, do not ask any questions. The president's not talking to any media today. And so, like, we're going to listen to that. So, of course, we're all next to the border rope that we have, and the president's coming by, and everybody's throwing out questions about when relief is coming, and FEMA, and this and that, and all these different questions. And I'm like, this is Clinton. So I was saying, Mr. President, what's touched your heart today? Boom! He turns, looks right at me, walks right up to me, and starts to talk about the emotions of the day, because that was the kind of president he was, right? And so we got this great stuff, and he was like, oh, that was fantastic, how did you get that? And it's like, speak to what he wants. He doesn't want to, this is how the man thinks. So those opportunities come up, sitting down with Arnold Schwarzenegger on a one-on-one. That was a great day. Other end of the spectrum, interviewing a woman, and I can't remember her name off the top. Who was the woman accused of the arsenic killing of her Marine husband? She was convicted, right? Anyway, she was convicted. After she's convicted, I had this one-on-one with her in prison, right? Through the glass. And she's talking to me through the thing, and I'm like, how do you feel? And she's like, she was saying how stunned she was, couldn't believe it, blah, 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 this and that. And in my head, I'm like, well, the law is always right, shouldn't have done it, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? She was exonerated for cross-contamination, blood contamination. And I thought, oh my God, I sat right across from her and just assumed Pat guilty, because here she is. And it was like, no, she was actually getting screwed over, So these are unique experiences that I don't want to say only, but are part of everyday broadcast news. You never know what's going to come up. Yeah, there's a lot of Mondays, mundane days in between and different stuff that's happening. But it's always cool to be around people and to meet new people, and whatever the story is, it's always cool. Yeah, still have stuff to complain about. That's life. That's being a human being.
I have another question for you.
Yes.
You have a degree in history, don't you?
I do.
Do you think that was from Berkeley? I can't remember. Berkeley or San Francisco or...
Yeah. Well, my path was, I went to a junior college first, and then I went to UC Berkeley. Never had great grades, but, always a guy that could just make it. And definitely history was a good background, because you do a lot of writing. If you're going to do a lot of writing, you want to do a lot of reading. And so that helped me a great deal. What it didn't help me with was, like I said, the speed factor. Not to ask, as curious as I was, trying to learn not to ask one question after another, to just get a soundbite that's usable and go. Because it's time, get it done. So that was the big lesson that was the toughest for me, because I always was like, oh, this is interesting, let's talk more. So, yeah.
Hi, I was wondering, how do you train to pronounce words better, especially for people who are non-native speakers? And also, how do you project? And after that would be, how do you make your voice, just how to protect your voice? Because I feel like I have a lot of sore throat. I don't know why. Thank you.
I would say, if you feel like you have an accent, embrace it. I guess it can be conquered, so to speak, but I feel like the most success comes to those that learn to embrace themselves. And let that be, if you watch enough news, you know that some people have accents. And there's still reporting. Absolutely. I can't name them offhand, but I know that they're there. And if they embrace it, it becomes part of their delivery. And that's just, how they handle it. Like I said, that circle, right? You start off trying to imitate everybody else because you're not good enough, and then eventually you'll come full circle back to who you are. When I started, and I will say, I used to talk with I have a pretty high voice, and I used to talk with an even higher register. I never even heard it until I started doing television, and then when I would watch the stuff back, I'm like, how do I talk with that high of a voice? It blew my mind. So I practiced trying to bring it down. How low can I get it? That kind of thing. And actually, I was able to get it lower than it was, so that it was more acceptable, or at least I felt it was more acceptable. But how did I do that? I just would record myself, listen to it, try it lower, record it, listen to it. And you probably heard what I said earlier. One of the key ways to not get lost in words is to know the ideas. When you look at your script, don't look for each individual word having to be perfect, because it'll sound like you're saying words. Know the ideas in the sentences. What are you trying to get across? And that way, when you go to say it, you're more concerned about getting the ideas across than having to say it word for word. You know what's supposed to come. If you stumble, don't say, excuse me, oh, I'm sorry. That kind of announces, I'm just learning this. If you stumble, you just keep going. Or you say that word again. And no one will even hear it, because it's you that's being the most judgmental of yourself. So, are you worried about having an accent?
I think I do have one.
Okay. Well, I don't hear an accent from you that sounds unacceptable to be on the air.
Sorry. Just really quick, I noticed like when you watch the news, like they sound very clear. They don't sound like how we talk. We just real life.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, where do they train to speak like that?
I don't know that there's any place that they're training to speak like that. I think that they're probably listening to themselves over and over again from the stories that they're doing. You definitely want your energy to be there for it. But again, it's to get the ideas across. Think about when you're talking to somebody and you're trying to convince them of something, tell them something. That body language, like me talking to you right now, I'm looking at you, I'm trying to get an idea across to you. I'm not thinking about every word that's going to come out of my mouth and whether I say it right. I am talking to you. Same thing. You're going to be at a fire scene. You're going to go, take a look at this. I mean, these houses have been completely destroyed here. These families are now going to have to find a place to live tonight, blah, blah, blah. You're getting across the ideas without having to worry about, is my inflection exactly right? Am I doing it? It'll be right if the sincerity is there. So, yeah. You guys have been so...
I got another.
Yeah.
Circle back to the writers that let's say you've worked with over the past, and did you have like favorite writers? Like this person always writes in a way that I speak or something like that? Or is it just you're gonna take whatever comes your way? People aren't like pining, I'm gonna write for Jim.
Well, yeah, there's definitely writers that you can tell are a bit more experienced than another or have more of a talent for it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's the attitude that matters. Even if you have a writer that's struggling, if they have an attitude of, I want to get better, great. Then we're going to help you to get better if you're open to it. If you have somebody who, I've run into things before where people have roadblocks up, they don't want to hear that they're not as great as they think they are, and so they don't want to learn anything. Well, that you can't work with. It's like, okay, well, go be your great, wonderful self someplace else, because we need to make some progress here with whatever it is. You can't, individual. I did have one And this wasn't, I don't know whatever happened to this woman, but she was on a tour from the Middle East, and she wanted to do a story on a Middle East piece. But she didn't have a story in mind, so she asked if she could retrack, another story that was already done. So we were being kind, and we were like, okay, because she just wanted her parents to see that she could deliver. Well, she didn't agree with all that was in the story. And she got very offended by the parts that weren't pro her position. And she's like, I'm not saying that. And we said, well, this is as a reporter, you have to do both sides. And she said, no, they're liars, I'm not going to do that. Well, you're going to have trouble being a reporter in the United States. Because here, the idea is that you give air to both sides if there's a demarcation line there. So I do remember that. That was many, many years ago, early on. So I don't know whatever she ended up doing in life, but she didn't do that story.
Mark, have you had that experience of things that you had to say that you didn't feel comfortable saying?
Not once. No. Because I don't have to agree with the position to say that someone else has that position. Not a problem. That's the truth. So I've had issue with stations that become very, what's the word I want to use? They're very packaging oriented. Everything has to have a banner. Everything has to fit a certain, we're doing stories, I can't even think what the banners were now, but everything gets a label, like the story gets a label, whatever it is. And I had turned in a story about whatever topic it was, and they didn't have one of the labels filled. So they asked me to rewrite the story to fit the label. And I said, no, this is the story. What are we here to do? The news, the truth, or to meet the requirements of a label? That was very frustrating. So maybe that is one part where I was frustrated with it. But I've never had a problem with representing a view that if that's the view of the person, that's their view. I'm not going to say it's mine. I'm going to attribute, but yeah, it's not an issue.
This is gonna be a out of the park question, but relating to that, would you say that now news sites and all that are trying to glorify or dramatize due to those types of labels? Like now they're trying to lean into that so that they can just have more viewership, more drama, more glorifications.
Right. I mean, it does, and everybody knows this, right? The different stations are playing to their tribe, which is unfortunate. Hopefully, they, even though they may have their tribe, whatever it is, that they're at least representing the other side and trying to show some balance and not skipping over details because they're so bent on representing their tribe. But we all know we see that, especially at the national level. And that's unfortunate. When I was working at Channel 6 here, it was a Fox affiliate, but it was not tied to, it was XETV, it was a Fox affiliate, but it was not run by the cable station. But I remember once going to Michael Moore, the documentary filmmaker. He was doing a presentation and he called on me, and I forget exactly what the question was. And when I said Fox, I forget what joke he made, something about, well, here we go. And then I started to say, I said, well, we're not controlled by the cable station. And then he went into this whole thing of, I see nothing, and I was, all right, come on now. But yeah, I mean, we all see it. It's unfortunate. And now with the internet, and we're getting off topic here, but now with the internet, especially playing to whatever our proclivities are, then we're all on a feedback loop, getting what our positions already are, which is not healthy. I don't think, in the long run.
I'm going to assume it's the same sort of ordeal in the political news sphere. I mean, personally, that's where I want to go. That's what I've wanted to do for a while. I'm going to assume it's the same in political.
You mean the people with their positions and then wanting to put their positions out there?
Things like that, like reporting on politics mainly. I personally only kind of offhandedly chose that because I'm not a smiler. I'm not really one to do local news. But I mean, you know what I mean. I'll do it. But
Are you passionate about political news?
Yeah.
Awesome. I see you brighten up right when I said that.
It's something that I've wanted to do, and also, were there any, would it be okay to like refuse to work with any stations? Like I don't think I will ever work with, if I do go down that path, I don't think I'll ever work with CNN or Fox. I grew up with CNN, my best friend grew up with Fox, and both of us hate those networks.
Gotcha. And you have your choice, of course, in this country to work for whoever it is that you want to work for. It's just say no to a company that may want to hire you. But I will plead with you a little bit and say those things that you don't like won't change if people that want to fix them don't get involved and get hired by those stations. They need people like you. It's better to have somebody who rubs against the grain to go in there and go, we need this perspective. Otherwise, they're just going to keep hiring people who are, a puzzle piece for what they're already doing. I will tell you, I've been interviewed by stations, one in particular that was very conservative. And they interviewed me from a standpoint of, they were asking pointed questions of me about, if such and such and such and such, what would you do about such and such? Totally grilling me on wanting me to be as conservative as they were. And I told them, I said, well, if that came up, I'm after the truth, right? Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? I mean, maybe the conservative position has got something to say, but the other position has to be heard too. They didn't hire me. But it was weird to get that kind of interview. I mean, one thing to think about with broadcast is that you'll be judged on your political, not always, but there's a good chance you'll be judged on your political position, your gender, because they are creating a family. So when you look at an anchor desk, how often do you see two women or two men? Usually it's a man and a woman, right? And then this family gets complete. So they're thinking in those terms. What position is open? Are you going for the male anchor position? Are you going for the female anchor position? What other industries do you know of that can be that out front and judgmental about it? You know what I mean? All you can control for yourself is to be as positive as you can be as informed and ready as you can be. I guarantee you'll get work. Guaranteed. And as that progresses, you'll have more and more influence and sway over what's going on. So, if CNN offers you a job, if Fox offers you a job, please take it.
I would like to say, nice answer. Yeah.
You see so many anchors jumping stations too, so they can start in CNN, end up over here, and move back and forth and around.
Right.
And it seems like politicians in general, they always have a politician's niece or somebody ends up getting the job at a certain station and whatnot. There's a lot of
Well, definitely on the national
a lot
level.
of you say so and so. Well, her uncle is the governor of
Right, because they're just looking for somebody to parrot what it is that they already think.
Yeah.
Right. You reminded me when you're talking about the anchors jumping around and whatnot. Again, getting into the business, I was so naive. I interviewed at one station, it was in West Virginia, and behind the news director's desk, he had framed all the business cards of stations where he worked. And me, I'm like, oh, how cool, you know? Like, I'm like, well, how impressive that he's worked at all these stations. Not realizing, no, that's the nature of the business. You know, finding a home in this business is a difficult thing to do. You end up going from one to the other, and news directors are one of the big ones, where they, go from one to the other. But the other side of it is, there is work out there. And if you lose a job at one station, guaranteed another station. So long as you're, competent at what you do, the other station will want to pick you up.
Has awkwardness ever been an issue while giving interviews?
Awkwardness?
Yeah.
You mean like talking to someone?
Or like
Oh,
if the
yeah.
person is making you feel awkward?
Oh, where the person's making me feel awkward. I don't think so. I mean, I'm trying to think if, if someone was being threatening perhaps, but I can't, I'm not pulling anyone to mind. Again, you've got me on this anecdotal thing of weird things that happen that wouldn't happen in other jobs. We were doing a story about, remember King Stallman? Are you guys old enough to remember King Stallman?
Yeah.
Bail bonds
I
guy?
voiced his commercials.
Oh,
Wow.
awesome.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's
I'm also Miss Aladdin bail bonds as well.
Ooh.
I love it.
Sorry.
No, that's cool.
Small world.
We were doing a story on King Stallman putting up the bail for a Navy personnel guy who shot a guy who was breaking into his car. And, probably don't want to shoot somebody when they're breaking into your car. It seems a little raising the stakes, but King Stallman identified with it. He put up the bail for the guy. And when we went to the scene, there was the car that had been broken into. And there was this blood trail that led away from the car. And we're like, well, I bet that's the guy that broke into the car. So we're following the blood trail, and it led down this path and around all the way to this house, and then through the gate and up to the door. And we're like, I'll bet the guy that did, this is got to be him. And so, like an idiot, I knocked on the door. And I said, we're just doing the story of the car that's broken in here. And just a real gruff voice came out and just said, we're not talking, blah, blah, blah. This and that. That's fine. We're gone. But that's a weird thing in the repertoire of weird things that happen in your line of work.
How many of the folks, because you mentioned how so many media personalities jump from station to station, how many of those cross over into the new form of media? Like how many of them have you seen go into the YouTube channels that have millions of subscribers also? Is there
Well, on the national level, you guys, who Megyn Kelly is. She had gone to NBC, very successful on Fox, and then she went to NBC. Now she's on Sirius XM, doing her own show. And then some of these other, YouTube is my favorite channel, right? There's just so much, and you can go to stuff that's in depth and intelligent, whatever you want. And it's always there. It's just there. So I'm trying to think, what's the physicist's name? Oh, gosh.
Neil deGrasse?
Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's got Star Talk, right? And that's a podcast he has with the comedian. And excellent show. And I only get to see it. I see it on YouTube or I listen to it on the podcast. Very popular.
What about the more local,
Local people doing that kind of thing?
You see them also show up in other, online, reporting sites?
Well, everybody now, the weathercasters, you'll notice, or maybe not notice yet, but all the weathercasters are doing their weathercasts online as well. They're all doing them on Instagram or wherever they can get on Facebook. They're posting them. This is part of the job now. You can't just do your television stuff. You got to get your online stuff as well. So yeah, I would say everybody's doing that. Are they leaving their TV jobs to do that? Not necessarily, because they're going to be where the paycheck is. If you can figure out how to monetize it, yeah, lots of people are doing that. I guess I don't know exactly how it works with how many viewers. Actually, a friend of mine started the Nardcast, and when he started it, he had very little to go on. He just friends. He asked, "Hey, did you guys listen to this?" The latest I saw, he posted he's got more than 1 million followers. I was like, what? And they give him a plaque, you know, a YouTube plaque to put in the background. So, you know, who's to say? It's just limitless. It's exciting. Yeah.
Do you think that there's even more of a transition that's going to happen where the focus is going to come off TV and be more on having a bigger online presence?
You know, this question, who was the longtime host of Comedy Central's newscast? Jon Stewart. He was doing an audience talkback, and he got that same question. And he said he was unfazed by it. He just said, okay, who cares? You know? Okay, so if it's not coming across your TV on airwaves or a cable or streaming, then it's going to come across the web or whatever. It's the same thing. Who cares how you get to it? It doesn't change the production of it. You're still going to want to watch it, however you get to it. Obviously, you need to monetize it somehow. You got to have ads or whatever, but YouTube seems to be providing that for. I don't worry about. I'm a huge SNL fan. I don't worry about if I can catch it live, because I know the whole thing's going to be on YouTube. And they probably don't worry about whether I watch it live, because they can monetize it on YouTube because there's going to be commercials in it. So that part of it, so basically, the stuff you're studying is going to be around. You're not threatened by it changing where it comes out. So.
You mentioned that kind of the jumps that you made different places. How long did you stay in those situations, and then what was it that allowed you to make the jump? Was it an offer from them, or were you seeking a different opportunity?
Well, you know, life is a whole combination of things, right? I had my marriage, which lasted for a cup of coffee. When it ended, I was kind of this, well, what now? It just so happened that happened when this job in Palm Springs opened up. I was working out of Mount San Antonio College, and one of the students said, hey, they're looking for an anchor in Palm Springs, you should send them a tape. And my life was so up in the air, I was like, yeah, you're right, you should send them a tape. So I did, and I didn't know it would lead to the opportunity that it did. Also, like I said, after a month, I was ready to dump the whole thing. I was going to go back to my old job, and then they said, no, you got to stay, blah, blah, and then I felt better and stayed. I didn't realize you're changing your whole life. But then I stayed 2 years there. I went to Oklahoma City and stayed 5 years there. And then when I came back to California, again, you never know what's going to happen. I came back to California. I went up and down the state. I went to every station that would see me, and none of them offered me a job. And when I came all the way down to San Diego, talked to the stations, nobody. And then somehow I found out this Fox affiliate existed. And I was like, well, I never set up an appointment with them, but what the hell? I just drove over there and rang the bell.
Oh, for real?
And the squawk box, and I said, yeah, I'm looking for a job. And they said, oh, okay, they buzzed me in. And then the assistant news director came down. Next thing I know, I'm touring around the station and this and that. Interviewed, whatnot. But I didn't get a job offer. So I went back, I was hanging out, went to go see my mother up in Santa Cruz. We're walking on the beach, cell phones existed at this time. And I was like, I was in the process of telling my mother, I'm done. I said, I feel better about it now. I really wanted to be in California, but I said, I feel better about it now. I've interviewed at all the stations. I can feel like I did what I needed to do. Now I'm going to go wherever. As I'm telling her that, my phone rings, and it was the Fox station. And they said, yeah, we know you're going to do some reporting for us, but would you mind doing some anchoring for us? Because our anchor is in the hospital with back surgery.
Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. So, total serendipity. Luck. You never know. That led to 17 years at that station. You never know. The other part of that, though, is then the station got sold after that run. I would have gladly stayed there for my whole career. But it got sold. And then everybody lost their jobs. And it's frustrating. I was lucky because I was able to move over to Channel 10 for a while. But a lot of people, that was it. They decided they would, not try to go back into broadcast. But those that wanted to stay, they found a way. They found a way to get other jobs. You always can in broadcast, I think. If you know what you're doing, you can find a way.
And you were in that for maybe 25 years total?
Oh, well, if you go back to the first show that I did for LA County, where I was in my mid-20s, I think, when that started. And I'm 63 now, so what's 25 to 60? 35? Thank you. Did you count? I'm not very good at math. But yeah, so 30 plus years of TV type work. And in broadcast itself, close to 30. Yeah. But it goes back like that, right? When you look back on it, you're like, what the hell? So fast.
What motivates you to leave?
The news?
Well, yes, retiring from it.
Oh, well, they didn't renew me at 10 at the end of my contract. And I thought about, going to another station, but then I was just like, I'm done. I was like, I'm ready for less pace. And financially, I figured out that I could do it. And so I just made the decision. What's weird, though, and you guys are a long way off, most of you, from facing this decision, these kinds of things, is you still have to figure out, well, what's my purpose? And before I got into broadcast, I had my own mobile DJ business in LA. I did hundreds of weddings. That was the main thing. Parties, weddings, all kinds of stuff. Oh, I could tell you stories about that. But anyway, I loved it. Loved being a DJ and loved the vibe of the weddings. And I thought, even back then, eventually I could see myself officiating these weddings. More age appropriate anyway, right? I don't want to be the party guy anymore. And so that's what I looked into and then started doing that. And now I've done, in the last couple of years, I've done about 60. Yeah, 60 ceremonies. I got a number booked already for this year. They're wonderful. They're so much fun. Yeah.
It is a happy event.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't pay anything. It does pay, but next to a main anchor position at a station, it pays nothing. But I'm all right. Yeah. It's good.
Georgina,
That's a great question.
Do you have time to watch some playback?
I'd love
A little
to.
bit. Do you mind staying?
My camera's about to die.
A little bit. Why don't we take a 10-minute break then for a potty break, and then come back at 6:35.